Iron Man, the fragments went through Stark's body. Punctured lungs of the heart would instantly turn a genius and philanthropist into a cold corpse. But no, he's alive, he's alive. A magnet under his heart and everything is fine. But the most delusional thing in this situation is also the fact that the fragments in Tony's chest have not reached his heart yet. The militants did not find his body among the battered convoy, identified him as a billionaire and decided that he would still be useful to them, took him to a secret facility in the ass of some desert, found a unique surgeon and electronic physicist in one bottle, who still managed to prepare and conduct a unique, previously unproven operation. Yes, all these movements would have taken more than one day, during which Tony would have had time to retire into the world sometime so 50. You are called the Da Vinci of our time. What do you say to that? This is nonsense, I was drawing. What do you think of another definition? The seller of death. Hey journalist, are you serious? Tony has been selling guns for 20 years. Honey, you're a little late with that question. When the door closes behind Pepper, a member of the film crew is reflected in it. Pepper holds the folder with two hands, then one, then two again. It is quite strange that the sound and explosion wave reaches the location of the soldiers not in a couple of seconds, but almost instantly. At the same time, the hats fly off the roadie and the general, but when they change the frame, their caps remain in place. Tony has already regained consciousness for a couple of minutes, but the professor next to him strangely shows complete indifference to a person who is scared and does not understand what is happening to him. And all the professor could mumble in Stark's direction was an insignificant phrase. I wouldn't do that. You have to build it. The Jericho rocket. The one you showed me. The plot hole. Firstly, why would the Ten Rings gang need a homemade rocket when they have the exclusive opportunity to purchase any Stark Industries armament directly through Abadiah? And secondly, judging by this appeal, you didn't say that the man you paid to kill was the great Tony Stark. The price for killing Tony Stark has gone up. Tony Stark was spared his life just to blackmail Abadiah. Logically, the gang just had to keep Stark captive in an empty cave and wait for Abadiah to fork out, and not pointlessly follow the plot, supplying Tony with materials to create the first costume. But the main thing, according to the unique vision of the gang leader, to assemble an ultra-technological rocket in a cave using an oven and an autogen, is the same as twisting a paper airplane. An acute desire to live and an exorbitant motivation for freedom are able to endow a person with completely new knowledge and experience in creating mini-nuclear reactors. If the energy of 3 gigajoules is close to a conventional electromagnet, it will melt and pair in the blink of an eye. And I don't want to think about what will happen to Tony's body. At the moment when Tony shows the drawings to Vincent, a glow from the reactor can be seen on Tony's chest, which, surprisingly, Tony will insert into his chest only in the next scene. It is ridiculous to observe how the hardened dogs of war believe that the hydraulic knee joint is an integral part of the future surface-to-surface missile. And even when the leader suspects something is wrong, he just comes with stories about Genghis Khan, instead of turning the cave upside down. Genghis Khan, his empire, was twice the size of Alexander the Great's empire, and 4 times the size of the Roman Empire. Even here I screwed up twice. The state of Genghis Khan surpassed the Roman Empire by 5 times, and the possession of Alexander the Great by 6. By pure coincidence, the leader decided to take a look at the monitors, just at the moment when the heroes are completing the final assembly of the costume. That's neither earlier nor later. I'll try to buy some time. Stick to the plan. Vincent's clumsy act to buy time for Stark had the desired result only due to the fact that the screenwriter gave professional action films the image of complete nonentities. If the suit is powered by Stark's reactor, why did the lights go out in the cave? Did the suit suck out the electricity supplied to the cave? At the same time, Stark claimed that the suit would have enough energy for 15 minutes. But for some unknown reason he continues to stand still and waste precious time for the sake of the surprise effect. The hulking iron machine crept up on the militants completely unnoticed. When the machine is powerless in a situation, the best thing that can come to an empty head is to rush screaming at a multi-ton piece of iron. After such behavior of the militants, there is great doubt that it was these guys who so famously defeated the U.S. military convoy. Stark was incredibly lucky that none of the thick-headed spirits thought of using his favorite toy called an RPG. Instead of flying out of a dangerous place right away, Tony began to burn the stocks of weapons in a senseless attempt. Moreover, he does not worry at all that all this good around him can explode at any second. Considering that Tony was completely unharmed after such a hard blow, it seems to me that the notorious Colonel William Stryker worked on him at one time. Somehow I find it hard to believe that Black Hawk-class helicopters they carried out a search mission over enemy territory without combat cover. Therefore, I intend to announce that I am closing the production of weapons at Stark International factories. This, of course, is commendable, only that our Stark is going to exist after his office ceases its main and only activity. If Pepper pulled out the magnet, due to which metal fragments will now be held. Pepper inserted the reactor into Tony's chest, and does it again in the next frame. What's the point of scouring the desert and collecting the remains of a suit when you have all the blueprints left in the cave? The mug on the table is upside down, in the next frame it is already as it should be. After such a trick, Stark should have turned into something similar. And what is this? Power selection at random. Is he a scientific genius or an underdeveloped suicide? Moreover, the first mistake did not teach him anything, and he then commits the second. But most importantly, Tony transforms the electrical energy of the reactor directly into jet propulsion. For 1 second, this is physically impossible, since these two forces have completely different natures. It is completely unclear how the formation of ice on the outer skin of the armor so completely cut off all the electronics of the suit. But at the same time, Tony is able to move his hands and fingers, where, in theory, everything should be set in motion using just electronic hydraulics. In the billionaire's ultramodern and technologically advanced house, the ceilings are clearly made of gypsum board. Why turn on car alarms in your own house? Of course, it is the gang that Stark knows that is shown on TV. So it also turned out, by pure coincidence, while Stark was traveling from one hemisphere to the other for several hours, the gang still had not relocated. The gunman behind Iron Man stands in the sun and immediately in the shade. The cliché in the combat system provides in advance the means for unplanned situations. And when did Stark manage to equip the suit with combat systems, if he ordered Jarvis to assemble the Mark III, only changing the composition of the skin? He went to the banquet at the same time, and then immediately put on the suit and flew to Afghanistan. It turns out that the Abram tank is able to shoot down human-sized aerial targets. After hitting the left chest of the suit with a 120mm projectile, even the paint on the armor did not deteriorate. Okay, Stark has an endless supply of energy. But what normal person can handle a flight of more than 10 hours there? A deadly battle and the same flight back in iron armor without food, water, sleep, and rest? Or is Stark not just a billionaire and a brilliant scientist, but also a ninja capable of such tests for his body? Stark, therefore, left the U.S. airspace without any problems. But on their return, the Air Force suddenly began to fuss. It is clearly visible that Tony flew past the fighters, but after half a minute, it is unclear how he ended up under the beggar of one of them. The chance that after such pirouettes Stark would be able to hook his body to the plane is 1 in a million. As is the faulty parachute system. And as soon as Tony saved the pilot, the second fighter, probably in joy, decided to stop chasing the unidentified object that shot down the plane and violated U.S. airspace. If the accident occurred during a training flight, it makes sense to inform the press. The costume assembly procedure is perfectly calibrated. But the genius Stark did not seem to think about the disassembly of the armor. And what the hell is Steve Rogers' half-dismantled shield doing here? If he is now resting with his master in the Arctic ice. The glowing earplugs in Obadiah's ears appear right between shots. If Obadiah originally planned to kill the whole gang, why put himself in such a position and come himself? You never know what would have gone wrong. After all, there is a whole group of armed militants. But a more idiotic solution is to store direct evidence against yourself directly on your company's work servers. Where did Obadiah come from behind Tony? Was he hiding behind the couch? And why didn't Jarvis warn Tony that this grandpa was hanging around the house? Tony is completely paralyzed, but the position of his head changes between shots. And what did Obadiah expect, in principle, if Jarvis provided the police with proof of Tony Stark's murder tomorrow? Would you run from state to state in an armored suit? By pure coincidence, Tony's classified reactor is ideally suited for an absolutely leftist model. The connector, parameters, and voltage of the system all match perfectly. It seems like a grown man is fooling around and playing hide and seek. And cliched, having superior speed, unable to catch up with a girl in heels. With reactor number 1, how long will we last? The energy is 48% and falling, sir. The reactor is not designed for long-term flights. Even if you burst from the strain, it is impossible to understand why such an engineering genius as Tony Stark did not equip the suit with an additional reactor in case of failure of the main one. Given the small size of the reactor, it would not be difficult to place it in the ass of the suit. How can you feed a voracious suit exclusively with an energy source on which your life directly depends? With all due respect, but in this situation, Tony does not look like a fool twice, but a fool squared. Sir, the energy is 19%. As soon as Obadiah put on a formidable armor, he immediately began to speak with typical villainous phrases. At the same time, the flight hours in his suit are no more than 2 minutes. But he does such tricks in it, as if he had completed a course of months of training. The good old thing is to throw it away than to tear off your hands and head on the spot. Sir, you won't believe it, the ghost has returned. No need, this is a tactical exercise. Yes, sir. Verbal confirmation from an unauthorized officer is enough for the soldiers to calmly press their asses without asking their direct leadership. Both suits use an identical energy source, but the Iron Merchant's repulsors produce as much smoke as if he were running on diesel fuel. Surprisingly, Obadiah's engineers created software for the Merchant with a similar flaw as on the Mark II model, disabling all ice crust conversion systems on the hull. But the most amazing thing is that the director decided to leave behind the scenes. How did Obadiah revive the de-energized Merchant? Ripping the closed helmet off Tony's head, Obadiah had to tear off the billionaire's head along with the helmet. If the helmet is destroyed, how does Tony give the command to the hand and turn into an analog of a mini-shield? And even without the guidance system, you can see that you are aiming at the wall. It's just a unique selectivity system for the reactor's energy output. He just threw Tony away, but he shorted Obadiah to death. 1 minute Tony was fine, the next he was out. So what? Why such a reaction from the press? If all the events on the roof were hushed up by the shield, and no one should know about the Iron Man, except for a couple of people on the road and this family. It's time to save the world. If you save the world, you can go through the hole.